So let's make a cinch satchel. I will have the pattern name and link down below. Right now I am making the internal slip pockets. I use waterproof canvas, so I only cut out one piece. As you can see here, I totally forgot to cut out the notches in the pink piece, but I'm going to go back and fix that. So I'm just folding over the top edge about a 1/2 inch and top stitching that. Again, with waterproof canvas, I only need one piece with no interfacing, and it saves on fabric. And we're just going to cut those apart, and I am going to clip the purple piece to the pink piece so I can match them up and go ahead and cut it out so I can later on sew the corners down. I get these clips from Walmart. They're in the hair section. So I know a lot of small businesses are starting to sell them, but if you can't front the money, then go to Walmart. They have a whole pack for like $4. And it works for thinner stuff. And then I buy the sewing clips from Amazon for my thicker materials. So I'm just going to match up the bottom and the sides for the slip pocket. Make sure that you have a middle line. You can either mark it with a fabric pencil or just crease it like I'm doing here. To be honest, it doesn't have to be exactly in the middle. As long as your lines are straight is all I care about. And I'm going to just match them up. They're not perfect because I didn't really cut them using a ruler, as you saw before, but as long as they are pretty much the same, I'm okay with that. So we're going to sew down one side, skip across, and sew down the bottom. We're going to come up one side of our crease or line. I'm going to try and get my needle right at the top stitching, and I'm going to back stitch a couple of times there for reinforcement, and then we're just going to turn it and come down the other side, and that's how you make your 2 slip pockets. And then we're going to just finish out the bottom. Again, skip over your corners and then come up the other side. We're going to do the same thing to the other piece. So now we're going to set that aside and we're going to work on the 2 exterior panels. And I am making 2 of these, so I have 4 exterior panels to work with. So we're going to take the top panel, find the orientation you want, and we are going to take the base panel, the one with the notches, and we are going to clip those right sides together. Make sure your notches are facing towards the top. And we're going to sew those down at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And because I am doing 4, we are going to production sew all of these. So now that that's done, what we're going to do is now fold back the base panel, and we are going to top stitch on the base panel with your seam allowance down towards the base panel. And we're going to do that for all 4. And we're going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I just use the edge of the middle part of my foot where the needle actually goes down. So now that that's done, what I'm going to do is mark the center of all my exterior panels. This will make it easier whenever we need to base down our cord channels. And I'm just going to use my scissors to make a little cut in the center. And after this, it'll be time to assemble the bag pretty much. What I didn't show, because I actually made them before I started recording on accident, was making the cord channels. The directions are pretty self-explanatory, so I'm sorry I didn't get to record that part. Here I am just matching up the side seams where the top and bottom were sewn down together, because that is exactly where I want it to match. And then I'm going to just clip around and sew it down at 1/2 inch seam allowance. And again, because I'm making 2, I need to do this to both. I always backstitch over that thick seam right there, just because that's where I'm adding 2 pieces of fabric together, and that might have a lot of stress on it. And then of course skip over your notches, and then again backstitch, and we're going to finish it out, and we're going to do the same thing to the other 2 panels. So now we're going to do the same thing to the interior panels. We're going to match them up right sides together. We're going to sew all the way around at 1/2 inch seam allowance. But the difference is with these, because we did not do a zipper pocket, we need a hole for turning. So depending on the size of your hands and the materials you used and the materials you used to interface will determine the size of your hole. It just needs to be what you're comfortable with and how easy or hard you want your bag to turn. So we're just going to do this to both interior panels. So the next thing we need to do is box our corners for all 4 pieces. And to do that, you are going to pull this notch until your top and bottom seam meet in the middle. Then you're going to butterfly the bulk, which means the one side goes one way, the other side goes the other way. And we are going to sew that down at 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to finagle it. Side note, that was my son coming to tell me hello. We're going to move it around so we can do both corners on the same bag at the same time. And what I mean is, you don't pull it off, snip the thread, and sew it down. It cuts back on thread and time, and it is easier. Now I will add a caveat: the thicker materials you have, you might not be able to do that, but I'm not using a lot of thick materials, and waterproof canvas is very easy to maneuver. So we're going to do that for all 4 pieces. now that that's done, we're going to just trim all of our threads, and then we're going to work on cutting down the bulk. I always save this for towards the end after I get everything sewn up. Unless I'm using foam, then I go ahead and trim foam as I go, just because it's so bulky. Now, I'm not trimming on the seams or close to the top. I've learned my lesson. If you leave your seam allowance in the top, it makes it easier to reduce bulk right there. So we're just going to fast forward through cutting all 4 pieces down. Now that we have all of our bulk trimmed, I'm going to add the cord channels to the bag. But as you'll see here in a second, I realized that I forgot the handle, and you actually need to put the handle on before the channel with the way that it sits. So here in a second, I'm going to realize that I missed a step, and I'm going to have to go cut out some handles and bring it back. Now, according to the pattern, they have a fabric size for the handle, but I use faux leather or vinyl. So I actually cut mine at 212 1/4 for my handle, and then I just sew it down a single fold instead of a double fold, to where it ends up being 112 1/4. So here I go. I'm gonna cut this out because I need to go cut a handle. So now that I have my handle cut out, I am going to add some double-sided tape to the center. If you don't have double-sided tape, you can draw down a line down the center and clip. Or if you're not comfortable eyeballing it like I'm about to, you can also draw a line down the center and lay your tape down. I'm using 1/4 inch double-sided tape from waywack.com. I'm going to go ahead and do both handles here because, again, I'm making 2 bags, and I like to do as much production style sewing as I can. So we're just going to peel the paper off of the tape, and we're going to fold each side to the center, and because this is a single fold, we're just going to butt up both sides instead of leaving a gap. Then we're going to just sew down on each side 1/8 inch seam allowance. So now that we have our handles made, we need to add them to the exterior of our bag, and they actually do go on before the channel. So for the handle, you need to use one of the side seams, and they each end goes 3 inches from this side seam. And I'm making the small bag version, so it can be kind of tedious. You just have to work your hands in there to try and get them 3 inches from on each side of the seam, and then I'm going to clip it and then baste them down for both of them. Now that we have that done and our threads clipped, we're going to add our channels to the exterior with the raw edge up. So you're going to be matching the raw edges. We're going to match the center snips and then clip it in place. And there will be a little gap on each end. That's fine, it's supposed to be there. And we're going to do that for all 4 channels and all 4 exterior panels. And we do baste it down at about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to hold it in place. After that, we're going to turn the bags right side out. This will also give you a chance to see if you missed anything, if you need to go back and fix it, if your handle is on the correct way, if your corners are sewed down enough, just to check it out. You don't want to get too far along and then you realize something happened. After that, we're going to put the exterior of the bag right sides together with the lining. So I'm going to stuff the exterior into the lining, and we're going to match up the side seams first. And you again want to butterfly those seams to reduce bulk, especially if you're using heavier materials. I'll always match up the side seams first, and then I will match up the rest of the bag and clip it in place. And we're going to do that for both bags. As you see here, I could just go ahead and sew down this bag since it was ready before I started on the next bag. And we will sew all the way around at 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I do not trim my top seam allowance just because I've learned that if I do, it creates a really big bulk at the top. Even though I'm not using any interfacing, I still don't want a lot of bulk at the top. So again, we're going to just sew this around at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Anytime you have to move your bag around, please make sure your needle is down. It will help keep your bag in place and it won't move out of the seam allowance that you have already started. Now that that's done, we are going to turn the bags right side out through the hole that we left in the lining. You only see me turn one here because I had my partner turn the other, because again, I do work in a full working shop for our business, so she tends to help me out whenever I am on a deadline. And we are trying to get these bags done for our Mother's Day pre-order. whole bag's made out of waterproof canvas, I want to make sure I have a way to squish all the air out. So the only bad thing with this pattern is you can't clip the top because of the channel cord. So you have to actually take your time and roll down the seam at the top up underneath the channel, and then when you go to sew it, you have to really use your fingers to hold it back. And this is the 5th time I'm making this bag, and I have always ran up into the channel and had to pull my stitches out and redo it. So as you can see, I'm actually sewing from the exterior, which is what I don't normally do that, but if I do end up messing up, then it's not going to be shown on the exteriors. So I'm just going to take my time and use my fingers. Please be careful and don't run your finger up underneath your machine, and just pull the lining and the exterior down from the channel and try and use your fingers to make sure that the seam is staying right where it should. And because again I'm making the small version, the handle and the bag is it's very tedious. I love the pattern, don't get me wrong, but just take your time and it will come out exactly how you want it if you just take your time. So we are going to go around at 1/8 of an inch for this bag, top stitching it, and we're going to just go ahead and do that for both bags, and then we're going to close up our hole in the lining and add the cord after we get done with that. Now, once we shove all of the lining back into the exterior, make sure that your corners are poked out. That's what I'm checking right here. Use both hands if you have to, and just push them, and it will also help your exterior corners come out as well. Now for the cord that I use, I found a place on Etsy that sells cord. It's actually from like a jewelry maker small business. So what I do is I wrap the cord around and just eyeball how much I want it to hang over and cut it off. The pattern calls for 2 sides. I'm not doing 2 sides. I'm just going to do one, and I'm just cutting 2 pieces the exact same size for both bags, so 1 a piece. And then I have this thing, I don't even know what it's called, because my mother bought it for me when I first started sewing 6 years ago, and it helps pull cords through. So I'm just attaching that. If you don't have something like that, you can just push and pull the channel and the cord until it comes through, or use like a pin will help you. Just make sure that it's really stuck in there. And then we're just going to feed this cord through one side, out the other, through the other side of the channel until both ends meet back on one side of the bag. I'm not sure if it matters what side you use because of the handle. So I'm guessing a personal preference. I just picked a side and went with it. And again, we're just going to attach whatever you have to help with your cord, and we're just going to push it through, and we're just going to move the channel and the cord until we get it all the way around. Once you have your cords on one side, you're going to match up the ends, and then you're going to tie a knot together. And because this cord is kind of rubbery but sticky at the same time, not sticky to the hands but to each other, then once I get the knot in there, it's not going to move. So I'm just moving the knot up and down to get it real tight. And because I interfaced half of my channel, it's kind of not wanting to stay, as you can see right here, because my industrial machine does not like really thin materials. I had to interface it. So what I'm going to do is what I'm calling train the cinch. So it didn't want to stay closed, so I'm going to close it as tight as I can, and then I'm going to clip the cords closed so the bag will learn to stay closed and it will scrunch it up. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm hoping. If not, I will have to add the cord to another cord to the other side so it can be pulled closed and stay closed. So again, I'm just doing the same thing to the second bag. We're going to make a knot. We're going to cinch it closed, and then I'm going to clip the cords so it will stay closed. I'm just trying to scrunch it up so it will, because it is a cinch bag, so it will stay closed. I just got done making it, so I'm not upset that's not closing. We will check it out whenever I go back to look at it. And here are the final bags. I did sublimate this fabric myself, which I will have a video up later on that. And yeah, thank you for watching.